As the chapter begins, panic ripples through the gathered crowd as murmurs spread about the figure standing before them. It is Arcus Ray Theft. This is the tale of a young magician who climbs from absolute failure to unimaginable greatness. One night, when Arcus was only 6 years old, he dreamed of another person's life. He woke abruptly, heart racing, unable to grasp what he had witnessed. It did not feel like an ordinary dream. Instead, it felt like scattered memories, visions of airplanes, automobiles, computers, and scientific laws he recalled studying in college. Every image was sharp. Every sensation felt real. Arcus sat frozen, struggling to understand the world he had glimpsed. Before he realized it, tears streamed down his face. He could not stop crying, unsure whether he was grieving the fiancée he had left behind in that other life or yearning for a civilization far beyond his reach. His fingers tightened around the bedsheets as his body trembled, until a knock broke his thoughts. A maid announced that breakfast had arrived. When Arcus looked at the tray, a strange shock ran through him. It was a perfectly prepared meal, suitable for the former heir of the Ray Theft household. In this kingdom, everything revolved around magic. The Ray Theft family was a noble lineage of elite magicians, their ancestor having earned glory on the battlefield through overwhelming spellcraft. Each family head was expected to possess immense ether, and as the eldest son, Arcus had once carried all their expectations. Yet 1 week earlier, everything had fallen apart. After his ether evaluation, rumors spread rapidly that his power was no better than that of a commoner. Whispers followed him, branding him unworthy of leading the family. Desperate, Arcus had begged his parents for another opportunity, insisting he could succeed if given time. Instead, his father struck him and stripped him of his status, calling him useless. Since that day, Arcus had shut himself away in the family library, endlessly reading in search of a method to increase his ether. Even with the memories of an adult from another world, he found no answer. Not even 2 decades of foreign knowledge could change his destiny. As he struggled through another book, his younger sister Leisha appeared and asked whether he was still studying. When he quietly confirmed it, she invited him to play with her. Arcus hesitated, reminding her that their parents had forbidden her from approaching him. Leisha admitted the order came from their mother, but said she still wanted to stay with him. When Arcus finally agreed, she told him she loved him. She was the only warmth he had left. Leisha was his final source of hope. That fragile moment shattered when their father and several relatives stormed into the library. The family head immediately commanded that Leisha be taken away. Arcus apologized and tried to accept responsibility, but his father answered with another brutal slap and flung him aside. He declared that Leisha would inherit the Ray Theft estate and ordered Arcus never to go near her again. When Arcus begged for forgiveness, his father pressed a foot into his back and demanded to know what would happen if Arcus's worthlessness affected her future. Blow after blow followed as he called Arcus a filthy cur, warning that next time he would not hesitate to use magic. Left alone on the cold library floor, Arcus knelt silently, his face burning. He remembered the cruel whispers behind his back, branding him the Ray Theft disgrace, a failure who needed to be beaten into submission. When he tried to stand, his legs gave out, and he told himself it didn't matter. After all, he had already lived another life filled with suffering far worse than this. He recalled the parents from that other world, their gentle voices telling him he didn't need to push himself, promising they would always stand by him. He collapsed again, sobbing uncontrollably, unable to understand how lacking magical talent justified such cruelty. He cursed his fate, convinced everything had been destroyed simply because he lacked ether. He felt empty, powerless, and even wished he had never existed. Then, something inside him shifted. He remembered how, in his previous life, he had still stood and fought even when victory was impossible. Slowly, he wiped away his tears. He refused to shatter. He vowed that one day he would rise beyond anyone's expectations and become a magician greater than them all. When that day arrived, he would force his parents to face the mistake they made in abandoning him. From the moment Arcus swore to prove them wrong, he began to act. He spent the entire night in the library, and when morning came, he was still surrounded by books. Through his studies, he learned that magic in this world depended on mystic words that shaped spells. Once enchanted, those words could bend and animate reality according to the caster's will. To Arcus, This system felt far less restrictive than the fictional magic systems he remembered from his former life. He read about the Elder Tongue, an ancient magical language written in symbols known as art glyphs. These glyphs resembled the astrological and zodiac symbols he recalled from his memories. Arcus began to view spellcasting as a form of grammar. The glyphs functioned as vocabulary, assembling sentences that became spells. There were subjects, modifiers, actions, and structures, each activated by supplying enough ether. If the caster miscalculated the amount of ether needed, the spell would collapse. In simple terms, Arcus realized he required two things: a collection of spells and enough ether to activate them. Even with the memories and knowledge from another man's life guiding his studies, none of it altered the harsh truth that he lacked ether. With no one willing to instruct him, books were his only teachers. At that moment, a voice called out from beyond the window. Arcus looked over in surprise and saw his uncle, Crabe, greeting him warmly and asking how he had been. Before long, Arcus, Leisha, and Uncle Crabe were sitting together, sharing tea. Crabe commented on how quickly the two children had grown, saying it felt like no time had passed since he last saw them. Arcus politely responded that it truly had been a while and said he was glad to see Crabe doing well. Crabe laughed, teasing Arcus for sounding so grown up, while Leisha proudly declared that her brother studied harder than anyone else. This was Crabe Abend, the younger brother of Arcus's father, Joshua Raytheft. Like Arcus, Crabe had once been cast out for possessing too little ether. After leaving the estate, however, he proved himself on the battlefield. Through countless feats of war, he earned a respected position, and rumors claimed his strength far exceeded Joshua's. Before Arcus could speak further, his father burst into the room in a rage. Joshua declared that a failure like Arcus had no place among the family and raised his hand to strike him. Crabe immediately intervened, demanding to know how Joshua could strike his own child. Joshua coldly argued that Arcus lacked the ether needed to inherit the estate and that Leisha was the rightful successor. Leisha trembled behind Crabe, and Crabe questioned whether it was not far too early to decide such things. Arcus was only 6, and potential could still awaken. Joshua rejected the idea, insisting that their noble house had no need for the talentless. Crabe reminded him of their father's final words, but Joshua dismissed them, shouting that the times had changed. He declared Arcus unworthy of their name, claiming even a stray dog would make a better heir. Crabe's anger finally surfaced, and he demanded to know how Joshua could speak so cruelly about his own son. Before the argument could turn violent, Arcus stepped forward and stopped Crabe. Instead of arguing, he asked for a favor. He wanted Crabe to teach him magic. Joshua tried to silence him, but Crabe asked if Arcus was truly certain. Arcus answered firmly, stating that he wanted Crabe as his teacher and that he would no longer let fear decide his path. Crabe met his gaze and saw a resolve that had never been there before. Joshua attempted to forbid it, accusing Arcus of shaming the family, but Arcus replied that he had no intention of doing so. He insisted that if he could prove his ability, there would be no reason for shame, and asked if that belief was wrong. Crabe supported him, saying it was far too soon to brand the boy a failure. He asked Joshua whether Crabe's own success was an insult to the family, then declared that he would take Arcus as his student. He promised to mold him into a fine magician. Arcus bowed deeply, overwhelmed with gratitude, and in that moment gained his first mentor. Crabe brought Arcus to an open training ground. Arcus vowed to give everything he had, declaring that one day he would rise as the greatest magician and prove his parents wrong. Crabe replied that Arcus already understood the fundamentals, so it was time to show him something real. He directed Arcus toward a training target and recited an incantation, calling forth the wrath within him and shaping it into flame that scorched the air and consumed everything ahead. A blazing arrow of fire burst from his hand and streaked forward. Arcus watched in awe, stunned by the sheer power of the spell. It was his first time witnessing combat magic up close, and he could only call it incredible. Crabe assured him that once Arcus mastered that technique, he would be able to survive on the battlefield. Arcus admitted he felt afraid of what lay ahead, but Crabe told him to return to the basics. Control over ether came first. Crabe explained that they would review what Arcus had learned during his initial ether assessment. He told him to focus on his stomach and search for a formless presence within. Arcus concentrated and felt a gentle warmth, something like liquid or mist. Crabe praised the progress and instructed him to maintain that sensation even while performing simple physical movements. If he could do that, feats like the one he had just seen would one day be possible. Suddenly, Crabe paused and asked whether Leisha's room was located in the west wing on the 3rd floor. Arcus froze and asked if Crabe had sensed her ether. Crabe confirmed it, explaining that both humans and dark spirits possessed ether, and that he had been the one to discover how to detect it. Arcus was amazed and asked if Crabe could sense how many people were nearby. Crabe said that he could, adding that Joshua lacked that ability. Arcus immediately swore to master it as well. He then asked how a mage could determine how much ether to pour into a spell, since none of his books gave a clear explanation. He hoped Crabe knew the answer. Crabe asked whether Arcus had already realized it, then explained that the answer was intuition. When Arcus looked puzzled, Crabe clarified that magic could not be seen. It was not physical matter, so it could never be measured precisely. All a mage could do was rely on instinct. Arcus found that unsettling, but Crabe challenged him, asking whether he intended to give up when their training had barely begun. Crabe dropped a heavy stack of books onto Arcus and bluntly asked what he had been studying to learn the Elder Tongue and art glyphs. He said that choosing to remain an amateur was Arcus's decision alone. Crabe then explained that the volumes Arcus had been reading were ancient chronicles. They were the birth of heaven and earth documents, the creation of the world, and documenting the stars. A scholar's life studying the skies and planets, the spiritual age, and a record of the era when spirits roamed the earth. The Magician's Elegy, a chronicle from the age when magic flourished, and the Prophecy of Shadows. These works detailed the entire history and possible future of the world, along with demons and society's collapse, which recorded the 4 great demons destined to destroy the world and contained the Song of Destruction. Crabe explained that the whole of the Elder Tongue was preserved within these 6 texts. Arcus questioned whether such vast knowledge was truly hidden inside them. Crabe answered that no one could say for certain, since no one had ever fully deciphered the chronicles, especially the Prophecy of Shadows. He admitted that even he could not fully grasp the author's intentions. However, if Arcus wished to master magic, he needed to understand these writings, their origins, and their meaning, in order to draw out the greatest power from their words. When Arcus agreed, Crabe added that this was not even the complete collection and that a servant would bring the remaining volumes later. He warned that these were not ordinary stories. When Arcus asked what would happen if he deciphered them all, Crabe replied that Arcus's name would be etched into history, though he would need to learn to walk before he could run. Encouraged, Arcus felt his confidence grow. Crabe smiled and said he had a good feeling about him, promising not to let Arcus's efforts be wasted and vowing to make him skilled in magic. Arcus thanked him, thinking that with his uncle's guidance and the memories from another life, his future might not be as bleak as he once believed. Perhaps he could even discover a way to increase his ether. Yet as his studies continued, that hope faded. An entire month passed, and despite tireless reading, he found nothing about raising ether levels. He had hoped the knowledge from his past life would reveal an answer, but it did not. Instead, he began experimenting with the concept of ether consumption mentioned in one of the books. He meditated for hours, wondering whether he was actually using ether in the process. Suddenly, an intense burning sensation spread through his stomach, and Arcus panicked, realizing he may have pushed himself too far. Unsure of what to do, he debated whether to release it, deciding to think it through later. Before long, his vision went completely dark. Time slipped away from him. When he finally left his room in search of food, he ran into Joshua. Joshua noticed the magic books and sneered, saying that no matter how much Arcus learned from Crabe, his ether would always remain pitifully low. Arcus argued that ether alone did not define a great magician. Joshua struck him across the face, calling him a nuisance. When Arcus opened his eyes again, Leisha was there, crying and asking if he was hurt. She told him he was bleeding, but Arcus said it was nothing serious. Leisha hugged him and apologized, blaming herself, saying they treated him this way because she was going to become the heir instead of him. Anger flared in Arcus, and he told her it was not her fault. Leisha asked why everyone could not simply get along, saying she only wanted to play with him like before. Arcus wondered why his family could not see value beyond ability. Leisha's wish was simple, yet it would never be allowed. He realized that proving his parents wrong alone would not be enough. One day, everything would need to be settled properly. 2 years later, Crabe asked Arcus to demonstrate his progress. Arcus stepped forward and began chanting, calling upon the wrath within him to ignite into flame, to scorch the sky, and to incinerate all in his path as he became a blazing arrow. He released his magic. Crabe applauded enthusiastically, praising the display as incredible. Arcus thanked him. At the market, a shopkeeper admired Arcus's work, calling the carved seal magnificent. He praised Arcus, saying the seals he engraved were nearly flawless and would surely make excellent magic tools. He handed Arcus 3 pieces of sorcerer's silver as payment for the tools and order. Arcus expressed his gratitude, admitting he could not carve seals without the shopkeeper's support. Everything looked perfect, he said, and he would return with more before taking his leave. Satisfied with yet another smooth transaction, Arcus reflected on how much his collection of seals had expanded. Saw glasses were only one type among many sealed tools, items engraved with arc glyphs and widely used across the kingdom for lighting interiors, detecting fires, and handling countless everyday functions. He recalled his uncle's advice that carving seals would both refine his magical control and provide a steady income. That guidance had proven accurate. Simply by crafting these tools, Arcus was already earning a respectable amount. Since he was already at the market, he considered purchasing a book with the money he had earned through his own efforts. Before he could move, however, someone crashed into him. A girl stumbled forward, nearly falling, but Arcus instinctively reacted and used magic to lift her gently into the air. She apologized at once, asking whether he had been hurt. It was then that Arcus noticed several suspicious men scanning the area, clearly searching for her. Without pausing to think, he seized her hand and pulled her in the opposite direction. They dashed into a narrow alleyway and concealed themselves in the shadows. Nearby, the men muttered in frustration, complaining that the girl moved unnaturally fast and that if this continued, they would still be hunting well into the night. After some time, the voices faded. Arcus remarked that it seemed safe again. The girl clutched her chest, admitting that her heart was still racing. When Arcus asked why those men were chasing her, she admitted she had no idea. They had suddenly surrounded her without warning, and once she escaped, they refused to stop pursuing her. She thanked him sincerely and introduced herself as Sue. Arcus returned the greeting and shook her hand. Sue commented that she had never seen him before and asked where he was from. When Arcus suggested heading back toward the main road, Sue abruptly hushed him. Arcus wondered if the men had returned. Instead, she led him deeper into the backstreets, and an uneasy feeling crept over him. The narrow alley felt wrong. Before long, they reached a dead end. As they turned back, a man stepped into the passage with a grin. He announced that he had finally caught up to them and remarked that they had made things unnecessarily difficult. There was nowhere left to flee. Sue questioned how he had found them so quickly, and the man explained that he simply kept searching until he succeeded. She remarked that it was far too fast. Arcus immediately realized the truth. That speed meant the man had enhanced his body with magic, making him a magician. Arcus demanded to know whether he was a kidnapper and what business he had targeting children. The man casually explained that money was his only concern. Pretty girls sold well, he said, and fetched high prices. With Arcus's refined features added in, selling both of them would be extremely profitable. Rage flared within Arcus. The man only laughed, promising to make them suffer properly as payment for the trouble they caused him. Arcus assessed their position. Cornered in a dead end against an adult magician, they were at a severe disadvantage. If fortune favored them, the man might restrain himself because of their age. That hesitation might be their only chance. The man pondered aloud which spell to use before beginning a chant, shaping his power into a punishing rope. Before he could finish, Sue suddenly unleashed a spell of her own, invoking burning words to incinerate darkness and turn despair into destructive winds. Arcus froze in shock. It was a genuine spell. He quickly analyzed the situation and saw that the barrier the man formed was weak and would not endure much longer under magical pressure. However, Sue's spell itself was flawed. After resisting briefly, the man scoffed, mocking the idea that children could invent magic on their own. Sue stiffened, realizing her attack had failed. Arcus explained the mistake. Her wording targeted darkness, which referred to night itself. In daylight, the spell's effect was drastically weakened. The man acknowledged Arcus's insight, noting that he must come from a prestigious family. With silver hair like that, he would sell for an impressive sum. There was no need to hold back, he said, since magic could repair any injuries afterward. Sue snapped back in anger, calling him despicable for attacking children at full strength. The man mocked her in return, pointing out that she had just tried to blow him apart. Arcus realized the man still underestimated them. If their timing was perfect, escape might still be possible. He prepared himself to fight. Before he could act, Sue drew her sword and warned Arcus to cover his ears. What followed would be loud. The man suddenly stiffened, sensing an explosive surge of ether, and demanded to know where such power was coming from. Sue began another incantation, invoking the echo of footsteps to ignite the firmament and force the evil presence to suffocate. The goons shouted for her to stop, but her chant did not end because of him. Both she and the man turned as Arcus started chanting as well, describing a greedy soul that sought to possess everything without restraint, even the dust beneath its feet. As Arcus raised his right arm, objects scattered throughout the alley were violently drawn toward him, clustering into his grasp. The goons stared in disbelief, questioning whether Arcus truly intended to attack from such a distance. Arcus calmly revealed his intention to launch a rocket punch. With that, he hurled everything he had gathered straight at the man. Junk, debris, and loose objects slammed into the goon, and Sue shouted in excitement, convinced the fight was over. Arcus quickly covered her mouth, fearing that celebrating too early might tempt fate and cause the enemy to rise again. When Sue questioned his reaction, Arcus apologized and explained that premature victory often led to disaster. Sue then demanded to know what kind of magic he had used, especially the spell that pulled everything toward his arm. She insisted she had never seen anything like it and praised it endlessly. Feeling pressured, Arcus redirected her attention to the unconscious magician on the ground and warned that they needed to confirm he was truly defeated. As Arcus approached, suggesting the use of a binding spell, the goons suddenly leapt up and seized him as a hostage. Complaining about their persistence, the man muttered that he should have chosen a different first job. With Arcus restrained, the goon warned Sue not to attempt anything reckless, threatening that any spell could harm Arcus instead. Panic surged through Arcus as he realized Sue could not act freely. Remembering the intense heat he had felt within his ether earlier, he decided there was no time left to hesitate. Arcus forced his ether outward, confusing the goon, who failed to understand what was happening. In the next instant, an explosive force blasted the man away while Arcus was thrown to the ground. Sue rushed over, asking if he was all right, and Arcus quickly assured her he was unharmed before asking about their attacker. Sue pointed out that the goon had been blown back and was completely unconscious. Still stunned, she jokingly wondered if the blast had been caused by some kind of massive fart. Arcus immediately denied it, explaining that it was ether. When Sue argued that ether didn't explode like that, Arcus retorted that neither did farts, leaving him flustered as she laughed. Soon after, soldiers arrived and assessed the situation, praising the children and telling them they should be proud. One soldier asked if they had truly defeated the man on their own, and Sue quickly insisted that Arcus had done everything himself. Later, by a fountain, Sue properly thanked Arcus for saving her and introduced herself again. When Arcus revealed his full name as Arcus Raytheft, Sue froze in surprise and asked if he came from a noble family. Arcus nervously admitted it, prompting her to comment on his impressive lineage. She playfully squished his cheeks, calling them soft, while Arcus awkwardly questioned her behavior. Sue teased him, joking about corrupt nobles and exaggerated punishments, which left Arcus red-faced and confused. After a brief misunderstanding about what those punishments meant, the two burst into laughter and eventually sat down to eat together. Sue returned to the topic of his spell, calling it unusual but incredible, and asked if he had invented it himself. When Arcus confirmed this, she praised him enthusiastically, admitting that her own attempts at spell creation always failed. She noted how quickly he understood why her earlier spell hadn't worked, realizing he must be very intelligent. Excited, Sue asked if he would teach her magic, suggesting it would be fun and that he could pretend to be a real teacher. Arcus agreed, and Sue happily declared she couldn't wait to spend more time with him. As Arcus continued studying the books Crabe had given him, he reflected that compressing his ether into a hotter, denser form produced better seals, and he was finally seeing steady progress. Suddenly, Leisha called out from behind him, startling him so badly that his seal exploded. Alarmed, she rushed over and asked if he was hurt, but Arcus reassured her that he was fine. Leisha apologized for startling him, though Arcus insisted it was his own fault. Seeing the mess, Leisha offered to help clean up, and Arcus thanked her. As they worked, she noticed the seal fragments and asked if he had already begun carving them. Arcus asked whether she had tried making any yet, and she admitted she hadn't, explaining that she had only just started learning magic. She assumed Arcus must already know many spells, but he replied that he only understood the basics. However, with his uncle's guidance, he had learned Flammarion and could now cast it entirely from memory. Ligia was clearly impressed. When Arcus encouraged her by saying she would master it soon as well, she answered with resolve, promising she would give it her absolute best. Arcus moved to finish cleaning up, assuring her he would have everything neat in no time. Suddenly, he noticed the sorcerer's silver beginning to expand. He had never known it could behave that way and even thought the sight was oddly beautiful. The two of them giggled as the substance pulsed gently, almost like tiny eggs. Arcus wondered why it was reacting like this, since sorcerer's silver was not supposed to expand at all. He suspected that something he had done must have changed it, even though he had only been using it for carving seals and had not cast any spells on it. Then another thought crossed his mind. Perhaps it was reacting to the ether he had been needing. Curious, Arcus released more ether into the silver. Both of them stared in shock as it swelled even further. Arcus began to question whether it could even be called sorcerer's silver anymore and worried that he might have ruined it completely. Then, the idea of a thermometer suddenly struck him. He quickly grabbed some paper and began jotting down notes. When Ligia asked what he was doing, Arcus explained that he was writing a request to Uncle for materials. Ligia asked what he planned to make, and Arcus simply said he was certain she would love it. Soon after, Arcus rushed to Crabe's estate and banged on the gate. A maid answered and explained that Crabe was still resting, but Arcus hurried inside regardless. Crabe, lying in bed, groggily asked why Arcus was causing such a commotion so early in the morning. The maid apologized, saying she had tried to stop him, and Crabe remarked that if Arcus was nearly breaking down his door, it had better be because a war had started. He then paused and pointed out the dark circles under Arcus's eyes. In response, Arcus asked Crabe to dismiss the maid from the room. Once she left, Crabe questioned the sudden seriousness. Arcus then pulled out a glass tube and asked Crabe to take a look. Crabe recognized it as the tube he had previously sent and noticed the scale Arcus had carved inside it. Arcus released his ether and told Crabe to watch closely. He explained that he was releasing a controlled amount of ether and asked him to observe how the sorcerer's silver inside the tube reacted. Crabe's eyes widened as he saw the silver shift. At first, he thought it might be some kind of trick, but then he hesitated and asked if it was what he thought it was. Arcus confirmed it, explaining that the device allowed them to accurately measure ether. Stunned, Crabe asked if Arcus had invented it himself. Arcus admitted that he had, though it had happened purely by accident. Crabe then asked whether anyone else knew about it. Arcus answered firmly, showing that he fully understood the significance of what he had created. Crabe explained that there was no known method to precisely measure ether anywhere in the world, and he himself had traveled extensively. He declared that Arcus's invention could be the discovery of the century. Arcus agreed, saying it could revolutionize humanity's understanding of magic. Crabe then asked what Arcus intended to do with it. Arcus replied that he did not want to keep it to himself. He wanted to reveal it to the world, though the timing would need to be chosen carefully. Crabe was astonished and told him that keeping it secret would give him an overwhelming advantage over everyone else. But Arcus refused, saying he could not do that. He reasoned that someone would eventually discover it and try to claim it, so revealing it openly would bring greater benefits. Doing so would secure his name, his wealth, and serve his country at the same time. Crabe praised his foresight, telling him his judgment was sound. He advised Arcus to keep the ethometer hidden until the right moment arrived. When Arcus then asked about involving his friends, Crabe was surprised and jokingly asked whether he even had any. And with his uncle's help, Arcus began his great undertaking. Together, they produced as many athometers as possible, while Arcus spent countless sleepless nights working. After days of effort, Arcus finally held a completed device in his hands. He softly chanted, guiding the object through his will using psychokinesis, and the stone before him shattered. The athometer was complete. Arcus proudly presented it to Crabe. His uncle examined it and said that Arcus's name would surely be recorded in history. Overjoyed, Arcus said the invention would accelerate his studies tremendously, but now he needed a powerful spell to go with it. His thoughts returned to the kidnapper he had once faced, an adult far stronger than he had been at the time. He reminded himself that this world was not peaceful, and that he needed power to protect himself. He decided it was time to create his own spell, something entirely original, his ultimate trump card. Searching for inspiration, Arcus realized nothing would be more original than drawing upon knowledge from his past life. He imagined a weapon that did not exist here, a gun. An unseen attack would be rare and devastating, though dangerous. Still, this world was unforgiving. He took up the athometer again and chanted, calling forth a black bullet meant to tear through the air faster than sound itself and rip apart the wind. But when he fired, the projectile moved sluggishly. Frustrated, Arcus wondered why it was so slow when he had clearly invoked the phrase faster than sound. He reviewed the incantation and realized he could not remove the term black bullet, since it referred to metallic sling stones once used in the spiritual age to hunt feral beasts. He re-examined the entire spell structure and found the flaw. Determined, he resolved to rewrite the sentence completely. As he recalled Sue's earlier spell, a single word surfaced in his mind. Incinerate was a word commonly used to amplify fire-based magic. Arcus remembered how a single phrase could shift meaning depending on its context, just like the verses found in the magician's elegy. May they blaze with overwhelming force and incinerate the darkness. May they fill the silent night and engulf distant buildings, burning bright. He reflected on the phrase and noted that its first meaning referred to reducing something to ash, the second to driving away the darkness of night, and the third to a flame filled with vengeance. It reminded him of the language from the other man's world, where a single expression could carry multiple meanings at once. Because of that, spellcasting required careful consideration of where and how words were used. Every choice of phrasing carried consequences. Since he was recreating a gun, Arcus needed wording that would function in any environment and kill instantly. With 6 volumes of the Elder Tongue available to him, he turned his attention to the chronicles of the spiritual age. The events recorded there resembled the myths and legends he remembered from the other world. After searching through the texts, he finally found his inspiration. Refining the structure, Arcus chanted a newly forged incantation for the black bullet, commanding it to drive the pale horse galloping through the heavens in the blink of death's gaze. He fired once more, and this time the projectile tore through the air with lethal speed. From a distance, Crabe applauded and praised the spell, calling it impressive magic. Startled, Arcus spun around and realized his uncle had been watching. Crabe casually approached and asked how Arcus's progress was going, adding that he had some good news. When Arcus asked what he meant, Crabe said the timing was perfect and announced he would be introducing Arcus to his new attendant. Crabe presented the young man, and at first glance, Arcus thought he was remarkably handsome. The attendant commented that being reassigned so suddenly was unexpected, especially to a child. When Crabe asked if something was wrong, the man replied that it was simply whimsical. Crabe remarked that since the attendant was clever, Arcus need not feel guilty about relying on him. The attendant introduced himself as Noah Ingvain and said he looked forward to serving Master Arcus. Arcus greeted him politely, but Noah gently asked him not to be overly formal, explaining that excessive formality towards servants often invited ridicule. Arcus then asked if Noah already knew about his disinheritance. Noah confirmed it, saying what mattered most now was Arcus's intent moving forward. As Noah studied him with curiosity, Arcus simply replied that he hoped they would work well together. Crabe added that Noah would also teach Arcus proper noble etiquette. Noah remarked that Crabe was hardly a model example, noting that just that morning he had failed to provide any proper explanation. Confused, Arcus wondered whether it was truly fine for Noah to leave his uncle, since the two of them seemed well matched. Noah replied that change was exciting. He explained that he had followed Crabe because life beside him was never dull, and he believed serving Arcus would be even more stimulating. When Arcus asked if that alone was his reason, Noah said it was more than enough. Arcus was left stunned, while Crabe told him to accept it, adding that Arcus was endlessly entertaining. He assured him that Noah was trustworthy. Crabe revealed that Noah had graduated top of his class at the Royal Institute of Magic and could have pursued any path. Instead, he chose to follow Crabe. Known as the Winter Wonderkind, Noah earned the title through his mastery of ice magic, sharp intellect, and striking appearance. His skills spanned magic, rapier fencing, stewardship, and extensive training in Laner's history and etiquette. Arcus admitted Noah's background was astonishing. Noah replied that his abilities would speak for themselves and asked to demonstrate one of his favorite spells. Arcus agreed eagerly. Noah began chanting, calling forth shattered ice, withered gardens, and freezing winds, commanding glacial depths to rise like crystalline hell and halt advancing forces. As the chant ended, the ground cracked and froze solid. Arcus was amazed. Noah explained that the spell was Freezing Gale, an offensive variation he developed from Icy Breeze, originally meant to slow enemies. Arcus thought it deserved separate documentation. Noticing Arcus writing, Noah asked what he was recording. Arcus said he was noting the spell's ether consumption. Noah questioned how that was even possible. Arcus calmly explained that he measured it using the Ethelmeter, with mana as the unit. Noah was stunned. Later, the two engaged in a sword duel. Arcus evaded Noah's strikes, but was eventually disarmed and sent to the ground. Calling for a halt, Arcus admitted defeat, frustrated that he couldn't land a single clean hit. Noah observed that Arcus tended to overthink his movements and attempted techniques beyond his current limits. His strategies were too ambitious. Arcus realized he had been trying to execute advanced maneuvers from his dreams in a child's body. He would need to wait to grow. Still, Noah believed Arcus was an exceptional learner in swordplay, magic, and academics. What impressed him most was the Ethelmeter. He asked where Arcus had acquired such a device. When Arcus replied that he had built it himself, Noah demanded confirmation. Arcus explained that Crabe helped finalize it, but most of the work was his. Arcus then made a request. He wanted Noah to cast every spell he knew so Arcus could record their mana costs. Noah agreed immediately, though he asked what Arcus planned to do with the data. Arcus explained it would support the Ethelmeter's future release by providing sample measurements without revealing secrets, while also aiding spell design research. Noah admitted that Arcus was far more fascinating than he had expected. Crabe soon arrived, amused by their energy, remarking that it had been a long time since he had seen such enthusiasm. When Noah confirmed Arcus's exceptional nature, he noted that Crabe had never fully explained why. Noah asked if he could borrow an Ethelmeter someday. Arcus agreed instantly, saying he had spare units. Noah promised to keep it secret, calling it a treasure too valuable to share. Arcus said he trusted him. Noah seemed about to continue speaking, then abruptly stopped, brushing it off when Arcus questioned him. Arcus retrieved 3 Ethelmeters, which caught Noah off guard, prompting him to ask whether there were different models. Arcus explained that each device measured varying ranges and gradations of ether. He mentioned that he used them every day, carefully recording the readings, and wondered what could possibly be more exciting to a magician. Noah reminded him that he still needed to prepare for his next appointment. Arcus suddenly recalled his scheduled meeting with Crabe Abend and 2 other individuals. Later, at the Magician's Guild, a servant informed them that the Dark Chamber had been reserved to guarantee complete privacy. Another man, both curious and cautious, questioned whether Crabe was scheming again. The servant replied that secrecy and soundproof enchantments were routine for their guildmaster. The man noted that Crabe had not produced any remarkable research in quite some time and wondered if this meeting would be different, just as he entered the room. When Mr. Sylvester arrived, Arcus froze in shock. Overwhelmed, he repeatedly apologized, while Crabe and Noah quietly laughed at his reaction. Arcus insisted that Sylvester was not as terrifying as he appeared. Sylvester asked why they had summoned him and questioned why a child had been brought along. Crabe clarified that Arcus was his nephew and pointed out that his clothing made his gender obvious. Arcus formally introduced himself as Arcus Raytheft. As Sylvester prepared to begin, a maid abruptly interrupted. Sylvester demanded an explanation, and she collapsed to the floor, begging him not to kill her. When he asked again what the issue was, she repeated her plea in terror. Arcus, startled, asked whether Sylvester truly intended to kill her, even imagining something gruesome. The maid hurriedly explained that she had only brought documents, tea, and sweets sent by Mr. Belju's for their young guest. Arcus replied that he disliked sweets. Sylvester found that unusual for a child his age, while Crabe casually remarked that Arcus had always been strange. Once calm returned, Sylvester asked the reason for the meeting. Crabe presented the ethelmeter and asked him to inspect it. Confused, Sylvester listened as Crabe explained that it could accurately measure ether. Sylvester rejected the idea at first, calling it impossible. Crabe demonstrated the mechanism at the base, showing how it expanded in response to ether exposure. The stronger the ether, the greater the reaction. When Sylvester asked who created it, Crabe revealed that Arcus was the inventor. Shocked, Sylvester noted that the boy could not be more than 10 years old. Crabe admitted he had doubted it himself, but explained that the plan was to release the invention publicly. Sylvester tested the device and acknowledged its extreme sensitivity. Crabe added that while its range was limited, the implications were revolutionary. Although it could not yet detect ether directly, its precision alone would bring unimaginable profit to the nation. Sylvester questioned whether they truly intended to reveal it, reminding them they could monopolize it. Crabe stated the decision belonged to Arcus, who had already chosen. Sylvester asked Arcus what he sought in return. Arcus answered honestly: money, and access to Leaner's etheric research texts within the limits allowed by the state. Sylvester was taken aback by the boldness. He remarked that Arcus embodied the essence of a magician, driven by wealth and knowledge, yet remained an unusual child. Crabe added that Arcus had approached him suddenly for instruction and was already crafting original spells. Sylvester was stunned, noting that spell invention was a final stage task even for elite students, with very few successes. The only child he knew capable of such a feat was the prince himself. When Arcus trembled at the comparison, Sylvester commented that he looked like an innocent girl. He then asked whether the king had been informed. Crabe replied no, saying the king would immediately drown them in logistics and contracts. Asked whether he was offended, Crabe bluntly replied that the king was unbearable. Arcus froze, asking whether that was safe to say. Crabe dismissed the concern, explaining they were old friends. Soon, they stood to leave. Sylvester said all that remained was arranging the announcement. Crabe promised to contact him once a date was set. As Sylvester returned the ethelmeter, Arcus insisted he keep it as thanks. They departed soon after. Back at the Wraithetheth estate, Sue arrived cheerfully for another study session. She immediately noticed a bruise on Arcus's cheek and demanded to know what happened. Arcus explained that his inheritance had been taken. Shocked, Sue asked who had the right to hit him every day. Arcus replied calmly that he was used to it. Sue argued that disinheriting him over weak ether made no sense. Arcus said his abilities simply failed to meet the Wraithetheth standard. She insisted he seemed no different from other magicians. Arcus reflected that his ether was average, even higher than some officials, but compared to nobles, it was never enough. Sue asked why he still worked so hard at magic. When Arcus hesitated, she said that since he was no longer the heir, he didn't have to try anymore. She admitted she would have hated magic if she were him. Arcus explained that he wanted to become famous, to prove himself to those who discarded him. When Sue asked if that was childish, he admitted it might be. It wasn't noble, and it might never satisfy him, but it had kept him moving forward. Still, he wondered if it meant lowering himself. Sue disagreed, saying it was better than giving up. He was confronting his problems instead of running away. She pointed out that he could have hidden behind his uncle, but instead chose to grow stronger. To her, that was admirable. Arcus smiled, seeing it differently now. Sue encouraged him to aim higher than revenge and dream beyond it. Arcus wondered if she meant becoming a state magician, but Sue rejected the idea outright. Arcus was left speechless. There were only 11 state magicians across the entire kingdom. How could that ever be considered sufficient? Sue firmly believed Arcus could already pass the examination, insisting that life became far more exciting when one aimed outrageously high. Arcus grew weary of the discussion, yet Sue refused to let it drop. She urged him to think bigger, suggesting he aim to become a general or even rise to the ranks of high nobility. Arcus replied that becoming a general was at least conceivable, but earning a noble title was utterly beyond him. Sue dismissed his doubts and told him to chase it anyway. If he accomplished something truly unbelievable, something that would leave the entire nation stunned, then a peerage would no longer be impossible. Arcus still felt it was far outside his limits, but Sue brushed off his concerns. With his current talent and her extensive life experience, she claimed success was inevitable. Arcus raised an eyebrow, reminding her she was only a single year older than him. Sue answered confidently that 1 year made a world of difference. That, she said, was exactly the kind of towering ambition he needed. In the end, Arcus agreed to give it everything he had. Sue promised she would always be there to support him. If he wanted to reclaim his life, she said, he had to seize every opportunity and never hesitate to want more. Arcus remarked that she didn't sound like an 8-year-old at all. Sue corrected him sharply. She was 9. After a brief silence, Arcus asked if she had dreams of her own. Sue replied that she did. When he pressed her for details, she boldly announced that she wanted to make their nation strong enough to crush anyone who opposed it. Arcus was speechless. Sue continued, explaining how the great empires constantly looked down on them. The eastern tribes beyond the Cross Mountains, the southern maritime kingdoms, each waited eagerly for a chance to strike. If their country dared to step even slightly beyond its borders, enemies would immediately threaten war, stirring unrest among nobles and monarchs alike. Arcus was shaken by her fierce declaration, but Sue's considerations suddenly burst into laughter, admitting she was only joking. It was something she had read in a book. Arcus commented that she must have experienced a great deal, and that it sounded as though she believed their nation was severely oppressed. Before he could continue, Sue noticed something protruding from Arcus's pocket and asked what it was. Arcus pulled it out and asked her what she thought. Sue guessed flatly that he had removed a tube from somewhere and shoved it up his own backside. Arcus shouted at her to stop immediately, explaining that it was an ethelmeter, a device used to measure ether. He demanded that she at least pretend to be impressed. Sue froze, stunned, and asked where he had acquired such an object. Arcus proudly replied that he had made it himself. He then told her to watch carefully as he released his ether. The red gel inside the tube began to shift, and Arcus explained that the reading showed 10 mana, enough to perform psychokinesis. Sue stared at it in awe, and Arcus instantly recognized the expression in her eyes. She wanted one. When she asked for it, Arcus refused outright. Sue accused him of flaunting it deliberately, while Arcus argued that if he hadn't shown her now, she would only complain later once she discovered it anyway. What else was he supposed to do? Sue demanded he respect his elders and hand one over. Arcus shot back that he intended to release the invention publicly, meaning he couldn't distribute secret copies in advance. Sue fell silent, realizing he was serious about his ambitions, and reluctantly backed down. Arcus then proposed a compromise. She could use the ethelmeter whenever she was with him. Sue brightened instantly and agreed, her face lighting up with excitement. 2 years later, whispers filled the hall as everyone stared at a young woman. People wondered if she was Laisha Rateheft Harris. They admired how she had matured into a graceful lady and praised her exceptional talent. Joshua tried to keep her focused, pointing out that the vast estate ahead belonged to Lord Ca Gaston, the wealthiest noble in the kingdom, and reminded her to pay attention. Soon, a nobleman approached and said there was no need for formalities. He praised Laisha, remarking that she had blossomed like a flower. This was Count Perce Cromelia, head of the Cromelia family, a dominant military house that governed all eastern territories, including the Ratehefts. Joshua remarked that he and his daughter had eagerly awaited Lord Gaston's arrival. Just then, a girl arrived and greeted them cheerfully. Laisha recognized her immediately and addressed her as Charlotte. Joshua noted how Charlotte's beauty had only grown since their last tea gathering. Charlotte then asked about Arcus, and Laisha quietly replied that he would not be attending. Charlotte paused, recalling the rumors she had heard. Joshua turned to Perce and explained that he wished to formally dissolve his son's engagement to Perce's daughter. Perce immediately questioned whether this was related to Arcus's expulsion. Joshua admitted it was, calling Arcus's ether a stain upon the Reinheft name. Perce asked if the decision was premature, suggesting Arcus might still develop potential. Joshua insisted that their family was a military house and required strict standards. Perce commented that the situation sounded strangely familiar, causing Joshua to stiffen. Still, Perce acknowledged Joshua's achievements, particularly his role in suppressing the Hans during the Battle of Jars. Joshua expressed his thanks but maintained his decision, stating he did not wish to burden Perce's family. Perce then turned to Charlotte, saying they would respect Lord Reinheft's wishes. Charlotte objected, explaining she had never even met her fiancé. Joshua clarified that the engagement had been arranged solely between their families and that, given Charlotte's hesitation, ending it was for the best. Perce mentioned he had heard Arcus was now under Crucible's guidance. Joshua clenched his fist, stating it had been his brother's choice. His brother sympathized with Arcus, but Joshua insisted nothing would come of it. At that moment, Lord Gaston entered, remarking that it appeared everyone had arrived. The crowd welcomed him warmly. Perce thanked Gaston for hosting such a magnificent gathering, and Gaston replied that he was glad they were enjoying themselves. Joshua added that they were honored to be invited, to which Gaston replied that he simply wished to maintain good relations with the Eastern houses. Charlotte quietly leaned toward Leisha and warned her that Gaston was surrounded by troubling rumors. She went on to say that, due to his title and role in managing national finances, he wielded enormous influence. Rumors claimed his vast fortune was built on corruption and that his governance was ruthless. Leisha felt uneasy and asked why Charlotte would still come to such a place. Charlotte answered that, regardless of the truth, certain connections could not be abandoned. Gaston soon declared that he had arranged the finest wine for the evening and encouraged everyone to drink freely. Charlotte and Leisha quietly slipped out onto the balcony, leaving the clamor behind. Charlotte exhaled deeply, saying she could finally breathe again. Leisha confessed that her parents always insisted these gatherings mattered, yet this one felt especially noisy and overwhelming. Charlotte commented that events like this were paid for by the people's taxes, and she doubted the citizens would endure it forever. When Leisha softly asked about the rumors surrounding the Marquis's corruption, Charlotte replied that nobles viewed commoners as livestock, no different from pigs or cattle. Steering the conversation elsewhere, Charlotte asked about Arcus. Leisha spoke warmly of her brother, describing him as a born genius. She admitted that even though she studied magic herself, she could never hope to reach his level. His steady brilliance amazed her time and again, and witnessing his growth pushed her to work harder in her own training. Curious in turn, Leisha asked Charlotte what kind of man she liked. Charlotte said she favored strength and would never accept someone weak or lacking resolve. Leisha found herself briefly comparing Arcus, imagining his build for a fleeting moment. Just then, footsteps echoed toward the balcony. Charlotte stiffened and demanded to know who was there. A man stepped into view and apologized, introducing himself as a representative of the Royal Ministry of Justice. He handed them a case and asked them to keep it safe. The scene then shifted to Crabe's estate. Leisha rushed inside with the suitcase and immediately asked Noah where her brother was. Noah told her Arcus was in his room, and she hurried down the corridor to him. She flung the door open to find Arcus sitting quietly in a chair. He looked up calmly and asked whether she had enjoyed the party. Elsewhere, Gaston erupted in anger, demanding how critical documents could go missing and how such negligence was possible. When a subordinate apologized, Gaston coldly asked which papers were lost. The man reported that financial records and documents hinting at corruption were missing. Gaston was shocked, but the report continued, revealing that a secret ledger had also vanished. Alarmed, Gaston demanded to know whether the matter had been investigated. The man confirmed it had, explaining that the documents were likely taken during the party and that a suspect was already in custody. When Gaston asked if the papers were recovered, the answer was no. The man added that Reinheft's daughter had been seen leaving with a black case that clashed with her outfit. Gaston snapped that this could not be reported to Cremilia, especially with the Eastern military houses being so unforgiving. He ordered Leisha to be brought to him discreetly, claiming they would persuade her to return the case. When the man hesitated, Gaston assured him it would be handled gently. Meanwhile, Arcus stared at the secret ledger in disbelief, wondering why anyone would give such an item to a child. Leisha, confused, asked if the book was truly that important. Arcus explained that it was grave evidence and questioned why someone so young had been trusted with it, asking whether the man had said anything else. Leisha admitted he had only asked her not to inform her father. Arcus then asked what she planned to do, reminding her that despite being entrusted with it, she was not obligated to comply after seeing its contents. Shaking, Leisha said she had been raised to believe nobles must take pride in their station, act with dignity, protect their people, and uphold the law as an example. When Arcus asked if she was prepared to risk herself for justice, she answered that she was. She declared that she could not turn away from wrongdoing as a noble. Arcus then shared his plan. Later, Leisha met Charlotte, who immediately asked whether Arcus had taken the case. Leisha confirmed it, trusting him to keep it secure. Charlotte remarked that no one went near Arcus's room anyway, then noted how deeply Leisha trusted him. Leisha agreed, and Charlotte sighed that it was unfortunate Arcus was so girlish. Suddenly, Charlotte sensed someone following them and urged Leisha to run. Before Leisha could ask what was wrong, armed bandits surrounded them. Charlotte demanded their identities, but the men only stated that the two girls were coming with them. When one grabbed Leisha's arm, Charlotte instantly slashed his hand. Another attacked her, but she evaded easily, questioning why they would use violence against noble children. The men merely sneered, and Charlotte wondered if they already knew who they were and whether someone had sent them. They attacked again, and Charlotte cut them down one by one. She possessed a rare ability known as foresight, allowing her to glimpse an enemy's next move. It did not guarantee victory, but it forced her to fight as though defeat was unacceptable. Then a massive bandit stepped forward, clearly their leader, and calmly suggested she lower her weapon. Charlotte recognized him immediately and asked whether defeating him would reveal who had hired them. Using her foresight, she lunged ahead, avoiding his opening strike. But as she prepared to counter, fear flooded her. She understood the reality. Her blow would land, but it would change nothing. The difference in strength between them was simply too great. Accepting the situation, Charlotte slowly lowered her blade and told Leisha that they would have to endure it for now and wait for an opportunity to escape. Leisha nodded without hesitation, stating that if the worst came to pass, she would act as a noble was expected to. Some time later, Arcus was handed a sealed letter. Curious about its origin, he asked the maid who had delivered it, but she could only say she had been ordered to pass it along, mentioning that the messengers were well dressed and refined. Arcus read the contents and instantly called out for Leisha, only to learn that she had gone out earlier that afternoon. His legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. Noah arrived moments later, and Arcus, his voice trembling, revealed that Leisha had been abducted. The letter demanded that Arcus bring the ledger to a plaza near the slums, threatening that both captives would be executed if he refused. Noah quickly grasped the gravity of the situation and remarked that another party must be involved, immediately asking about the ledger. Arcus revealed the case and explained that Leisha had received it from a servant at the party, and that the contents were irrefutable proof of Gaston's corruption. Noah questioned whether Arcus had deliberately kept such critical information hidden. Ashamed, Arcus admitted he never imagined the Marquis would uncover the truth so quickly. Noah chose not to comment further, instead pointing out that if Leisha had been targeted, then something must have happened to the servant who originally passed along the evidence. Arcus clenched his fists in anger, furious that Gaston would drag Leisha into this. Noah calmly stated that he doubted her life was truly in danger, and Arcus agreed, reasoning that no sane person would dare kill the daughter of a viscount. When Noah suggested informing others, Arcus refused to involve his parents and instructed him to contact his uncle instead, someone with far greater authority than Joshua. He explained that raising an alarm at home would only cause political turmoil, and that he himself would go to the plaza. Noah warned that the letter carried no honorable intent, but Arcus declared that he intended to be captured on purpose, then escape later with Leisha and the other hostage. Noah asked what would happen if Arcus failed to reconnect with them. Arcus calmly replied that they would proceed with Plan B, directing Noah to determine Leisha's exact location within Gaston's estate while Arcus bought time. Resigned, Noah muttered that Arcus would force this reckless plan through regardless, already feeling a headache coming on. Not long after, Noah reported that he had located Leisha, and Arcus reminded him that Crabe could not act blindly without precise information. Saving Laisha was urgent, but Arcus knew it alone would not solve everything. He then began questioning the servants' actions. Why would someone from the surveillance office collect enough evidence to destroy Gaston, only to entrust the most vital proof to a child? Why hand something so valuable to Laisha, as if discarding the greatest chance for justice? As Arcus's unease deepened, no one noticed the change in his expression. Arcus instructed him to investigate one more matter, prompting Noah to sigh that Arcus truly knew how to overwork his servants. Later, Arcus arrived at the empty plaza carrying the case. Before long, the same bandits appeared and demanded confirmation of his identity. Arcus acknowledged who he was, quietly observing their mismatched gear and sloppy formation. They were mercenaries, not trained professionals. When ordered to submit quietly, Arcus drew his sword and demanded to know where his sister was. His blade slipped from his hand and clattered to the ground, triggering loud laughter from the mercenaries. They mocked him, repeating rumors that the Wraith of Tur was worthless, incapable of magic, poor in both physical and academic ability, and cursed with a fragile, feminine appearance. Burning with anger, Arcus demanded Laisha's release and attempted to cast fire magic, only to fail. As they restrained him, he reminded himself that he needed them to believe he was weak. It was degrading, but necessary. The bandits threw him into a cart and searched his bag, baffled to find only meaningless documents. They speculated about the contents, unaware they couldn't read, while Arcus silently celebrated having already replaced the real evidence with decoys. As the cart rolled onward, he noted that the first phase of his plan had succeeded. They soon arrived at Gaston's location. The bandits announced their return, and Gaston stepped forward, asking whether the boy before him was truly Arcus Rateheft. Arcus confirmed his identity and demanded his sister's release. Gaston replied that he would comply only after receiving the ledger. After reviewing the documents, Gaston's irritation flared, declaring it was not what he had demanded. He reminded Arcus that his letter had specified the papers Laisha possessed and demanded to know where the real ledger was. Arcus claimed an official had already reclaimed the genuine evidence, but Gaston dismissed the excuse, noting Arcus would not have come alone if that were true. Arcus then said he had left the true documents at home, prompting Gaston to suspiciously ask whether anyone else knew of them. Arcus denied it and pleaded once more for Laisha's freedom, promising to deliver the real ledger afterward. Gaston replied that he required proof before trusting anything and that Arcus had only himself to blame for attempting deception. He would not grant a second opportunity. Arcus collapsed into sobs, and one of the bandits casually asked what they should do with him. Gaston told them to take Arcus away, adding with a crooked grin that perhaps he should be thrown in with the pretty girls. Hearing this, Arcus forced a faint smile, thinking that if he ended up beside Laisha, he could protect her, wait for the right opening, and escape using magic once the danger eased. As the bandits started dragging him off, Gaston suddenly stopped them. When they asked why, Gaston ordered that Arcus be sent to the Holy Tower instead. He explained that Arcus came from a martial lineage, and it would be foolish not to take extra precautions. The bandits questioned whether he was serious, pointing out Arcus's reputation for incompetence. Gaston insisted that anyone could be pretending and repeated his order to take Arcus to the tower. When they asked what to do next, Gaston replied that the real evidence was hidden inside the Rateheft estate. They would wait and observe, he said, certain that Arcus's parents would panic once both children vanished. After things settled, they would place someone inside the estate to retrieve the ledger. When the bandits asked about Laisha and Charlotte, Gaston coldly answered that the girls would be disposed of as planned. Furious, Arcus shouted that Gaston was insane. He reminded him that Laisha was a viscount's daughter and that no noble would tolerate such a crime. Gaston replied that noble children vanished all the time, and when Arcus demanded to know who would ever believe that, Gaston explained that money erased everything. The world, he said, ran on gold. Money was power. Money silenced witnesses and buried truths. Arcus asked if Gaston truly believed wealth could solve everything. Gaston answered that money was the grease of society, just like magic, capable of reshaping even the most sincere emotions however he wished. One of the bandits struck Arcus on the head, knocking him unconscious. The men scoffed, saying Arcus really was as useless as the rumors claimed. Later, Gaston asked if any of them had ever met a truly frightening child, recalling the Prince of Laner, famed as the greatest magician the kingdom had ever known. One bandit agreed, saying he had heard of the prince's genius. Gaston explained that royal blood produced beings unlike ordinary people, inhuman prodigies who stood on an entirely different level. When asked why he mentioned this, Gaston said it was because of Arcus's eyes. Even while acting weak, Arcus had shown no fear, and something in his gaze reminded Gaston of the prince. Speaking to him hadn't felt like speaking to a child at all. Sometime later, the bandits woke Arcus and announced their arrival at the Holy Tower, a prison said to be impossible to escape. Inside, the cells were already occupied. A guard questioned a prisoner named Gar, asking why he was still there even though his sentence had ended long ago. Gar casually replied that he had nowhere better to be, and besides, the rooms were clean and the service was excellent. This strange inmate was known as Gar. The guards threw Arcus into a cell and slammed the door shut. To his horror, he found himself sharing the cell with Gar, the same thug who had once tried to kidnap him and sue. Arcus immediately protested, shouting that he refused to share a cell with that man. The guard glanced back with mild amusement and asked if they already knew each other. Without sympathy, he told Arcus that he was staying there until release, adding that Gar's sentence had ended long ago and telling Gar to hurry up and leave someday. Gar casually asked whether Arcus knew he was the reason Gar had been imprisoned and demanded to know what Arcus was so afraid of. Gar stood up, making Arcus flinch, but instead of attacking, he sighed and sat back down, admitting he wasn't seeking revenge and that he'd been out of line before. He apologized for the trouble he'd caused. Still confused, Arcus asked why Gar hadn't left if he was free. With his magical skill, Arcus said, Gar could find any job he wanted. Gar thanked him sarcastically. Arcus went on, recalling Gar's fight with that girl and saying it proved he had real talent. Gar bluntly replied that he fought for money. He said a sheltered noble like Arcus wouldn't understand. For commoners, life was ruled by coin, from food and shelter to survival itself. Gar then grinned, saying prison at least offered free meals, so Arcus should get used to him, teasingly calling him QTP. Arcus snapped, yelling that everyone needed to stop treating him like a girl. He declared he wouldn't settle in because he planned to escape. Gar scoffed, saying it would take far more than a few spells to break the tower's enchanted walls. Even if Arcus succeeded, the guards would swarm and restrain him again. But Arcus was already studying the glowing patterns on the cell door. He remarked that the seals were fascinating, then unleashed magic that sliced through them. The barrier shattered. Gar jumped to his feet in shock, demanding to know what Arcus had done. Arcus calmly replied that he was a magician and had simply cast a spell. Gar warned that guards would catch him instantly, but Arcus said he would fight them if necessary. When Gar asked why the rush, noting that someone would eventually free a noble, Arcus explained that his sister was in danger. She had uncovered proof of a corrupt noble and was now imprisoned in his estate. Arcus didn't know what awaited her if he delayed, and he refused to stand by while she suffered. Gar sighed that nobles never changed, and for people like Gaston, life was nothing but power and money. If Arcus was facing someone like that, the fight would never be fair. Arcus slipped out of the cell and vowed that he would save his sister, no matter the cost. After making sure the corridor was empty, Arcus advanced carefully. Not long after, Gar emerged behind him, strolling along as though nothing unusual had happened. He casually announced that he would assist, provided he received a generous payment for his trouble. When Arcus questioned his motive, Gar answered plainly that it was about quick money, and Arcus was in a position to pay. Arcus agreed, stating that he never forgot his debts. Satisfied, Gar accepted the arrangement, called it a deal, and formally gave his name. Upon hearing Arcus introduce himself as a rate heft, Gar abruptly stopped, told him to wait, and went to retrieve something before they departed. As they moved together again, Arcus asked about the piece of cloth Gar was carrying. Gar only smirked and replied that it was useful for certain things. Gar then laid out the situation. Every third floor of the tower contained guard rooms staffed by 5 to 7 men. Each guard was a trained magician equipped with sealing tools and ready for combat. Charging in recklessly would trigger a response of at least 50 guards converging from all directions. Arcus turned pale, admitting he lacked the ether reserves to handle that many opponents. Gar asked how many spells Arcus could currently cast. Arcus estimated around 10 mid-level spells and explained that he needed to save energy for the noble's estate. Gar mocked the number, calling it pitiful, and questioned how someone from a martial family could be so limited. Arcus quietly admitted that his low ether capacity was the reason his family had abandoned expectations for him. Gar laughed, amused that even Arcus had a glaring flaw. Irritated, Arcus shot back that Gar looked like a villain incarnate. Before the exchange could escalate, they spotted an approaching guard. Grinning, Gar declared that their first customer had arrived. He flung the cloth forward while chanting, commanding the enchanted fabric of Algold to bind and silence its target. The cloth shot out, wrapping around the guard and knocking him unconscious in seconds. Arcus stared in disbelief at the unusual spell. Gar explained that Arcus had inspired him to experiment with imbuing magic into objects. Arcus then referenced an old Algold farming legend from the spiritual age, mentioning one of its sacred weeks. Gar halted abruptly, demanding to know how Arcus knew such an obscure tale. Arcus shrugged and said he simply had a strong memory, capable of recalling every word Gar had spoken since their first encounter. Gar muttered that Arcus was unsettling. Nearby, another guard collapsed, prompting Arcus to shout that someone had fainted. A second guard rushed over, shocked to find a child in a restricted area, only to be subdued instantly by Gar's cloth. Moments later, a third guard appeared and demanded answers. As Gar prepared another spell, Arcus stopped him. Arcus raised his hand and released a spell he called Black Bullet, shattering the guard's leg in an instant. Gar stared in stunned silence. Arcus apologized calmly, assuring that healing magic would restore the man's mobility. Gar admitted he had never heard of such a spell. Arcus casually stated that he had created it himself, though he felt the name still needed work. Gar was left speechless, realizing Arcus spoke as though inventing spells was routine. Magicians rarely revealed casting methods before others, since spells could be stolen. Yet Gar understood that even if he tried, he couldn't replicate Arcus's magic. He couldn't even comprehend its structure. Arcus was far beyond what he appeared to be. The pair continued downward, with Gar counting that they had already cleared nearly 10 floors. Suddenly, Arcus winced. Gar asked if his ether was depleted. Arcus replied that he still had about half remaining. Gar frowned, saying their approach needed adjustment. Arcus couldn't afford to waste energy, especially since the floor felt unnaturally quiet. Both tensed as Gar whispered that the silence was wrong. Other levels had been loud with shouting and noise, yet here there wasn't even a sound from prisoners. He muttered that it felt unsettling. Arcus agreed but noted the silence could be useful, allowing them to hear guards long before they arrived. For now, he insisted they stay hidden and avoid direct conflict. Without warning, a soft voice whispered beside Arcus, asking what they were doing. Arcus nearly leapt in shock. A girl sat nearby in a wheelchair, bound by heavy restraints. Smiling calmly, she told him not to be afraid and called him a cute little bunny. Arcus stared, confused by her presence in such a place. She explained that she was a prisoner, though one kept under far stricter watch. Arcus hesitated, unsure how to respond. The girl reassured him she meant no harm and repeated her question. Arcus cautiously admitted they were escaping. She tilted her head and asked if he was a prisoner as well. Arcus snapped defensively, raising his voice, but the girl laughed and said anger didn't suit his face. She apologized, explaining she hadn't realized he was a boy at first. Her gaze swept over his clothes, and she immediately recognized his noble status. She told him that if he simply waited, someone would eventually come to retrieve him.